different orders. My aim has consistently been to foster hope and raise awareness around cervical cancer and the treatment that I had. So today I'm before you to talk about, the truthful account of my journey, the raw, unfiltered truth of my interactions with the healthcare system. So in 2013, at the age of 24, I underwent my first pap smear. At that time, I was already a mother of two beautiful children. So my daughter, Zali, was 3 years old, and my son, Kaiden, was 2. But despite having, childbirth, I had my children naturally. So despite having them naturally and allowing strangers to examine intimate parts of my body, I felt a profound discomfort and lack of cultural safety when faced with going to the doctors, and the prospect of a male doctor conducting, my procedures. So this isn't just for me, this is also like my cousins and my family members, especially the females, also really struggle with this in our area. So in my area, male practitioners predominantly comprise the available healthcare providers, and it results in a lack of choice for individuals like myself. So each visit to the local doctor, it really just felt like a gamble with no continuity of care, no consideration for our preferences. So none of the general practitioners that I actually seen bothered to inquire about my previous history, my pap smear history, or whether I preferred a female nurse or a female GP to perform any of my procedures. And it just made me feel like just another box to tick rather than a person deserving individualized care and respect. So I personally believe that this is a systemic issue and there is a massive need for change in our healthcare system. So my initial pap smear results came back low-grade pre-squamous, but I received little explanation to follow up from my GP. So yes, I'm a teacher, I'm educated, and I still really didn't know what this meant. So I had to do my own inquiry and research findings myself. But after the GP kind of gave me those results, I was informed to go back in 12 months' time. So throughout 2013, I experienced various symptoms that were dismissed or misdiagnosed by medical practitioners. Despite my persistence, I was met with indifference, skepticism, even victim blaming. And looking back now with the symptoms that I had, this is really alarming. So some of these symptoms included random bleeding, pain, discomfort, along with several infections. So my story, which is the slide we're on now, 2014 came around and I still really wasn't myself. I was normally a very fit, healthy person. I played sports, went to the gym, and this was most days of the week. I was writing to naturopathy and alternative medicines. But this is the year that had me really questioning if it was me or the system. So my symptoms got progressively worse. 2014 saw me suffer mentally and physically. I experienced bleeding that started intermittently and progressed to a point where I had to wear menstrual pads every day just to go outside of the house to ensure I left the house with a minuscule of confidence. So I left the house knowing, with a pad on, left the house knowing that if I was going to bleed out that day, that the pad would give me a couple of seconds to find a place to hide, or a toilet before it would flood my clothing. So it is quite disgusting. It's very confronting. My shoes would be filled with blood and the floor around me. There was nothing I could have done. So, this was my reality, and it was seriously horrifying. So I lived in black clothes and on painkillers, and I knew this was not normal. Other symptoms that took over my life were feeling incredibly lethargic. I had no motivation. I was literally going deeper into depression. I had a lot of pelvic pain that got worse over the year. Sugar cravings, insane sugar cravings. I just wanted to pick up a spoonful of sugar and eat it. I was unable to use a tampon, and I couldn't have intercourse, and I had, like with my partner, my sex life became non-existent. So these are all the symptoms. These are symptoms that are on the Cancer Council website that I was looking at. And, you know, I was going to the GP and telling different GPs about this, and I still wasn't being listened to. Next slide, please. So by the end of 2014, I didn't even have the energy to walk 50 meters. I was in constant pain. I was distressed. I held guilt that I couldn't be the partner, mother, daughter, friend, or work colleague that I wanted to be and had always been. So the help that I sought nearly became weekly going into 2015. So I was constantly at the doctors. I'm constantly asking for second, third, fourth opinions. I'm banging on their door saying, I am not okay, this is not right. And what was thrown back to me was definitely not person-centered. These statements were made to me in my journey to find a resolution that you can see on the screen. A resolution to my issues by medical practitioners, along with specialists, so gynecological specialists. So this is what I still carry with me every day. And I am not alone with these statements being thrown at us, not just particularly for Aboriginal people, but this is real life for our community. So things such as you have an infection over and over and over again. You have an infection, you have an infection. Here are some antibiotics. And for me, this went on for nearly 6 months. That's not right. Oh, your cervix is tilted. That could be causing some of your pain. You don't need a thin prep. Don't be ridiculous. So this statement came when I asked for another pap smear after bleeding out all the time. I bled on the pap smear procedure, and I have a work experience in health where I was a phlebotomist. So I did collections and worked in pathology. And I just did not want the result to be contaminated because I didn't want to go through this procedure again because it was excruciating for me. And whilst the speculum was still in me, I'm having an argument with a female doctor about doing a thin prep, which I had to tell her that I am paying for this. We had a bit of an argument, and at the end of the day, I was like, I'm paying for this, not you. I don't understand why you won't do this. Yeah. And then when I brought up my research about my symptoms on the Cancer Council website, I got told to stop being a Google doctor. Other things I got thrown at me by other practitioners were you were too young to have cancer. This still happens. Even if it is cervical cancer, it is slow growing. You have high grade squamous, whatever the jargon is, HSIL. Let's just monitor you and come back in another 12 months' time. Oh, Ashlee, you were very intense. You were very tense. Is your partner treating you okay? I need to just breathe. Your cervix is disformed. This is to a specialist. And I replied, yeah, that would happen after having children. His response to me was, you're too young to have children. And I reminded him that he was my obstetrician. Another thing that was said is no need to take a sample during your colposcopy. Here is some vaginal antibiotics and come back in 12 months' time. So, but the one that tops it all off is maybe you need to have a few runs and relax. It's all in your head. So I was quite symptomatic over and over going back to the doctors, and these are the things that were thrown at me. So struggling to articulate the depth of my turmoil, I just felt, you know, as though my very essence as a person was being overlooked. You know, it was a profound experience of feeling invisible, you know, as my voice and concerns were fading into the background for me. I was, the growing sense of isolation left me questioning my own sanity. Is it in my head? Wondering if anybody saw me for who I was. They wasn't believing me. Despite the comforting presence of my family and friends, I grappled with the profound loneliness that comes from feeling unheard and unseen in all of my struggles. So, and when I talk about my struggles, it's not just my struggles, it is my family and my struggles. People that are with you going through this journey on the sidelines are heavily affected also. So with each passing moment, it became increasingly apparent that my journey towards healing was becoming overshadowed by a sense of abandonment, leading me to confront the dawning reality that my options for support were not there and rapidly diminishing, because I felt like I was exhausting every option, every specialist, GP. So, it wasn't just my experience. It wasn't just me experiencing these emotions. My friends and family also shared the sense of helplessness and invisibility. We collectively felt the erosion of trust, particularly with those we should have been able to rely on the most. Next slide, please. So how would you feel now, thinking back, this is just the start of my journey. How would you feel if this happens to you? If this happened to you, sorry. So for my family and I, I felt sidelined and unheard. My individual needs and my cultural background seemed to be overlooked, which created a feeling of disconnect. I felt though our voices weren't being valued and our right to make informed decisions about, my health was disregarded. When our concerns were dismissed or ignored, we felt disempowered. And were unable to advocate effectively for what I needed. And the lack of emphasis on person-centeredness left us feeling isolated and unsupported, with little opportunity to voice our opinions or raise any complaints about our healthcare experience. Next slide, please. So how did I get to where I am now? With my mum and my family's help, we drove my diagnosis vehicle. It became clear that we had to knock on doors until somebody listened. So I believed that I had this stubbornness. I knew something wasn't right. So we kept on fighting, and that strength came from, my family. So we found a GP who referred me to a specialist that actually took me seriously. She was over an hour and a half away from my home. This would not have been an accessible option for many people in my community, unfortunately. But to me, she was our miracle. From the moment we met, she was very person-centered. She believed me and made me a priority. She showed me empathy and understanding. She listened to me, my concerns, my history, and she also listened to my mum, who was in that appointment with me. She explained everything and included me and my family in all the decision-making. I felt safe and understood. She gave me confidence, but most importantly, she took immediate action. She had the courage to connect me to the incredible team at Chris O'Brien Lifehouse. She acknowledged that my circumstances, symptoms, and inconclusive pathology results were beyond her specialty. So to me, this is courageous. So she had courage to say that this is too much for me. And I think, in your best interest, Ash, is to go and see these other professionals. So on the drive home from that appointment, several things were going through my mind. Okay, this is really bad. How can it have taken 2 years for someone to really listen to me and my family? But on a positive note, I feel now like I felt that I'm now getting some answers and I'm getting somewhere. And, oh shit, what's next? But that appointment changed my life. Next slide, please. So little did I know that this was the point that Sydney was to become my home for the next 4 months. So initially I had a cone biopsy. I returned home after this day procedure, but I didn't recover, and I was back in hospital 3 days later and found myself critically ill. Again, in the hospital system, I was left in the hospital in the waiting room for over 8 hours, nearly losing consciousness, feeling I was bleeding out excessive amounts of blood within, the hour. And I even had a letter stating that I had a recent operation and this was ignored. So I reached out to the specialist in Sydney that I had the cone biopsy at. That specialist, he called my mobile back and asked me to put any medical staff on the phone. So within minutes of that phone call, I was rushed in and given fluids and then rushed back to RPA and placed in the intensive care unit. This is a specialist that respected me, that cared for me and had empathy. So he trusted me that I wasn't okay and did something about it. So the next day, my specialist advised that I would be having further surgery to stop the bleeding and requested that I call my parents to come up immediately, as he wanted to explain things that were happening to me, but he also knew how important my family was to me. He understood culturally as well that it's important for me to have my family there, and that's what we did. So when you have your partner beside you and the doctor wants your parents there too, it's not going to be great news. But, I kept the attitude that just take it as it comes. So what was estimated to be a 10-minute operation to stop the bleeding turned into around 4 hours of surgery. And this is the day that I heard those exact words, that you have cancer. I was 26 at that time. And I had a large aggressive tumor attached to my cervical wall. And unfortunately, it came back that it was 5.8 centimeters aggressive tumor. It had already reached my lymph nodes and invaded my whole cervix, and I was deemed inoperable. So, I'm on the right slide, sorry. So, that's when the specialist said with tears in his eyes, "We don't know if you'll make Christmas." Can you please? Oh, so with the photos, sorry, just jump back one. So with these photos, this was I got told to go home for 2 weeks while they plan my treatment. Go home and get your affairs in order, and recommended I get family photos, in which we did. So they're the photos that you can see on that slide. Next slide, please. Thanks. I'll just make this quick. Sorry, I know we're going over time. I had months of grueling treatment, chemotherapy, radiotherapy. I endured physical pain, emotional turmoil, and moments of despair. But through it all, I refused to lose hope. I felt cared for by all the team, including all the nurses, doctors, and even including the administrative staff. Next slide, please. So my treatment was invasive. So radiation was every day, along with chemotherapy every week. This went on for 12 weeks. And then I had I had 4 rounds of internal radiation, and I had another 12 weeks of chemotherapy where I took my hair. And with the staff who supported me, we built really positive relationships. They supported me in taking my own hair instead of cancer taking my hair. So that's what you can see in those photos. Next slide, please. Sometimes I just had to take it a minute, but, I took it 5 minutes at a time, a day at a time, a week at a time, and a treatment at a time. But for me to keep, my positivity, that I could beat the odds and never give up hope, my specialist who had me at their, as their priority, included me and my family in all the decisions, all of the treatment, checking up on me. I even had their private numbers to message if I had anything, I was worried about anything. My specialist and I had done everything possible to provide for me to have a good outcome. Next slide, please. So, so the phone call, so it was around Christmas time that we were going to have a phone call that would make or break our family's Christmas. And it was my MRI results after all of my treatment. So my radiotherapist, she had good news and bad news. The bad news is that she explained, due to the intensity of the treatment, that I had a lot of scar tissue and that I would never fully recover from all of the radiation. However, that, that was all forgotten when she delivered the good news, is you are now cancer-free. And that is, the middle photo is where on my very last chemotherapy session. Next photo, please. So I did make Christmas 2015. So through the invasive treatments and challenges, you know, I had the support of my family and the compassionate care of my medical team. Their unwavering dedication and person-centered approach helped me navigate the darkest moments of my life, so guiding me to a brighter future. So, I just want to, you know, next slide, please. So the care of someone can really affect the outcome of someone's journey. And this is extremely true in my cancer journey. But my story is not unique, and it echoes the experiences of many others, particularly within Indigenous communities, where access to quality healthcare remains a challenge. So, you know, as we strive for equitable care for all, we must prioritise person-centred approaches, be person-centred in our practice, that honour the individuality and the dignity of every person. You know, next slide, please. Because without the person-centred care of my specialist general practitioners and people that were in my team to get me through my journey, I wouldn't have got to experience, you know, seeing my son start kindergarten and watching my daughter Aboriginal dance, going to uni, my son getting school captain, being able to watch my little nephew be born. I am now married. I coach an under-16s girls rugby league football team. So I just think it's really important. I want to thank and express my heartfelt thanks to all of you for listening and allowing me to share my story with you all today. And together, you know, let us work towards a future where person-centered care is the cornerstone of our healthcare system, where every individual feels seen, heard, and valued. So thank you. Be brave and ask me anything. I know we don't have much time. Thanks.
We've got time for questions, so if someone would like to ask. I'm really regretting the fact that I'm leading this session because I'm in tears, Ash. Thank you so much for your generous approach to the way you've shared your journey with us. Let's see if there's any questions from anyone else.
I don't know that I can talk.
Aww.
I don't have a question. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your story. It was just so powerful and so beautiful, and you just were so vulnerable, and thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I think this story is going to stay with me for a long, long time, so thank you.
Thanks, Robin. It's an incredible story, Ash, like to go through that and to now be cancer-free, like, yeah, it's amazing.
I couldn't have done it without the care of, you know, the team, because if I had a different team or I wasn't listened to, I wouldn't be here. You know, that story, I could share that story for over an hour with the in-depth, you know, treatment of each individual, but it really took, you know, the courage of a specialist to say, I see you, I hear you, I believe you, but I'm not your best person. And then put me onto an incredible team who did all of those things. Like when I was getting chemotherapy, I'd be in there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. The nursing staff would come, like they'd go up to Newtown and get lunch and bring me back things and sit with me for lunch. And like, it was so beautiful. And I honestly believe that if I didn't have that care and I didn't have that support, and I wasn't seen as if I didn't feel like I wasn't being seen as a human, I wouldn't be here today, because you know, it's in your belief, it's in your, you know, the support around you. And I had phenomenal support when initially I didn't. And if I had just taken their word for it, again, I would not be here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ash. It's, you know, what was really lovely was to hear from a personal perspective the principles that we heard from this morning's sessions, you know, things that Brendan talked about, that Royanne talked about, that Helen talked about, that, you know, that everyone mentioned, that you actually got to live and personally experience those. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. And just quickly, sorry, Beck, I do feel like we still have a major issue in our healthcare system. Like this is still prominent where person-centered care is focus and practice of people in our communities. And, you know, I'm just one story. And like I said, this is not a unique story. This does happen to other people. And, you know, this is putting up walls, especially for Aboriginal communities, the barriers as to why we don't want to go into healthcare systems and why we fear them. But, you know, with this approach and the amazing work through education and implementing these into our healthcare systems, like we can really make real change. But honestly, thank you so much. And thanks to Maria McKay for asking me to share my story. And it is a bit hard to get through and it is a short version, but I feel really honoured to be a part of such amazing people who want to make a difference on this platform and throughout the whole world. So I just feel really honoured to be a part of it. So thanks.
Thanks again, Ash.